Is the president telling people he's evaluating the
Absolutely
race?
false. That is absolutely false. I saw that reporting. We were not given enough time to get back to that reporting, just a couple of minutes, and we asked the president. The president responded directly when asked about this question because we said that we would, and the president said it is absolutely false. That's coming directly from him.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Quentin Fowlkes, Principal Deputy Campaign Manager for the Biden-Harris re-election campaign. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I can tell we're in a very serious moment in the campaign because we're able to get you, which we're not able to do most of the time when we really want to get you on here. I just want to go over this point again, raised by Kelly O'Donnell in the briefing today, because, as you know, as we all know, it was that New York Times story this morning that really kind of recharged the whole question of is the president going to step down and open up the nomination to someone else or somehow steer the nomination to the vice president. Again, your response to that reporting in the New York Times where the president, I have to say, it's funny when you read it. It might be getting overinterpreted exactly what those people were saying to the New York Times, but I just want to, again, get your response to it.
Well, first of all, Lawrence, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure. It's unequivocally false. The president said himself that he is in this election. He met with Democratic governors today, reassured them that he is in this election to win it, as you guys saw earlier in the clip from Governor Hochul. The president told our staff today at campaign headquarters that he is in it to win it. And so that is where Joe Biden is. That remains unchanged since before the debate to now. And we're going to continue to do everything we can to make sure that we're building the campaign and the apparatus that is going to win this election, because make no mistake about it, the campaign that performs is going to win this election. And that is exactly what our campaign has been doing since April when the president announced for re-election.
So I wanted to be able to talk to you about exactly where this campaign is. And I think we have to talk about it now on a day-by-day basis, because here we are on July 3rd, basically a week from the debate. I could have imagined last Friday that by July 3rd, the subject would have moved on to something else. It's still where it was. The dialogue that you have to contend with, it's not the dialogue you want, but the dialogue you have to contend with out there is the president's age, his performance at the debate, which surprised a lot of people, including me. And was it surprising to you, knowing the president and having been around him as much as you have, especially as a campaigner? And I know that you're basically stuck in the campaign office most of the time, but you've been around him a lot more than a lot of people. Was it surprising to you to see the way he got stuck on some of those answers?
Well, the president is a human being. He had a bad night. He acknowledged it himself. He said that he had a bad performance. We understand that. He understands intrinsically what the American people saw, and our campaign understands, as well as the president, and under his leadership, now what we must do. And we make no qualms about that. We understand it. But at the end of the day, I think what's going on here is that not that our campaign wants to blow past this, because, again, we have acknowledged it, the president has acknowledged it, but I find it a major disservice to the American people that at the end of the day, we are talking about 90 minutes of Joe Biden's performance after he has delivered demonstrably for the American people. And at the same time, Donald Trump was granted immunity yesterday or 2 days ago. And the person that is in the job currently that could be using that immunity came out and said forcefully, this is dangerous. And we have still been talking about the fact that Joe Biden had a bad debate performance. It's the same as when we have skimmed over when Donald Trump says he is going to be a dictator. The same as when we skim over when Donald Trump says there's going to be a bloodbath if he loses. The same as when we skim over all of the extreme political violence, when Donald Trump says it would be okay for me to enact revenge against people who are against me politically. We've never had a president say that type of thing before. And Donald Trump is saying it routinely, and yet we get caught up on this. And so our campaign is not upset because we understand, and it's our burden and it's our responsibility to make sure that we are saying and acknowledging that the president had an off night. But, Lawrence, there are way more important things at stake here that just get glossed over. And it's time that we focus on them. And our campaign is going to continue to focus on them because those are the fundamental stakes of this election. Donald Trump only thinks about himself. He is a convicted felon who will do whatever it takes to keep and gain political power so that he can enact revenge and retribution. And the Supreme Court that he appointed justices to have given him the keys to do that. And we are focusing on a 90-minute debate performance. It's preposterous. Our campaign is going to do the work as we have been to continue to make sure that we are drawing the contrast to the American people. But make no mistake about it, Donald Trump is not interested in the job of being president of the United States to serve anybody except himself. And President Biden is waking up every single day, as we continue to see him do, even after an off day, to deliver for the American people.
So when I saw the president give his speech the day after the debate, North Carolina, 20-minute speech, that was the sharp, strong Joe Biden that I had grown accustomed to covering here. I ran most of that speech, a 20-minute speech. I might have run 19 minutes of it here that night. I expected to see one of those every day after that in order to recover from what had happened at the debate. Why, and this, by the way, was, I thought, one of the fair questions of the White House briefing today. Why hasn't the president delivered another one of those speeches every day or most days since then?
Well, look, I wish that we could, and the president wishes that he could. Nobody draws more energy from people than Joe Biden. But at the end of the day, he is still president of the United States. And there is a number of things that he must attend to because he, unlike Donald Trump, again, is actually interested in the job of being president of the United States. But we have seen the president out. We saw the president land at 2 a.m., greet supporters, and give that speech that you're mentioning in North Carolina. We've seen the president go to New York to fundraise. We have seen the president respond to the Supreme Court immunity ruling. We've seen the president go out and address extreme heat and the crisis on climate that this country is facing, that he is continuing to make investments in a priority of his administration in. And so we have seen the president out. And look, at the end of the day, sometimes everything doesn't get covered the same way that it does for major milestone events. We're not always going to have a State of the Union or debate. But the president of the United States understands that this work is something that must continue even when everybody is not paying attention. And Joe Biden understands that, and Joe Biden is putting in the work every single day to continue to deliver for Americans and keep Americans safe both domestically and abroad.
So because this is the Biden-Harris campaign, all of the money raised by this campaign can be spent only by those two candidates. You can't hand it off to some other candidate in some of these dream scenarios that people have come up with. And Kamala Harris is the other candidate who can spend that money. And so I know where you are tonight. I know the president is in the race. I know you are all working on the Biden-Harris campaign. Is there any contingency plan discussion at all going on in the Biden-Harris campaign for mechanically how it would work if Joe Biden were to drop off the ticket and Kamala Harris were to move to the top of the ticket?
No, we don't need one. Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee. He said today that he is still running for president of the United States, and that's where our focus is. And our resources are going to continue to go on the ground to meet voters where they are in their community. The robust organizing programs. We had 1,500 organizing events in battleground states across this country, almost 25,000 volunteer recruitment shifts. And that's what remains fundamentally unchanged, is that before the debate and after the debate, our campaign has been building to make sure that we are going to be in a position to communicate to the American voters. We deeply believe that campaigns matter. The president believes that, which is why he has had a robust travel schedule to battleground states to communicate to American voters. And it's why our campaign has been investing money not just in the air, on television, radio, print, but also on the ground, communicating, building up an apparatus of organizers to bring in more volunteers to continue to get the message out that Donald Trump is a danger to this democracy and only cares about himself. And that is where our focus is. And so we don't need a contingency plan. Joe Biden is the nominee. He is running, and we're going to continue to use the money that we're raising, which I will also point out, after the debate, $26 million in grassroots fundraising donations, $33 million raised total. We continue to see support from grassroots supporters across this country supporting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris because they know what's at stake and they trust us to use those resources to bring this thing to victory. And that's exactly what we intend to do.
Final question about polls, because I know a lot of people out there are very urgently interested in polls and have been waiting. And I said, on debate night, let's wait to see the polls. We have now seen the polls. Most of them astonishingly negligible movement, 1 point maybe in one direction or the other, within the margin of error, a tie in all these polls, except for two polls, CNN poll, New York Times poll. They each show a 6-point spread, which is just outside the margin of error on those polls. Do those polls concern you? And is there something in those polls that suggests something that you need to do?
Not at all. The polls from day one have suggested that we need to fight. We understand that this is a margin of error race. It was a margin of error race before the debate, and it's a margin of error race after the debate. Look, Lawrence, I think you had me on after I had won Senator Warnock's race. It's not easy to shake me. I've seen polls that had me down 3 or 4 points, and I know what the work that had to go into it to bring that race back into focus. We've got into a runoff and did it again. But most importantly, Joe Biden knows that. He has been in the political realm for decades. He understands the work that has to go into this. And so all the polls show us is that we have to continue to do the work to communicate to the American people. But honestly, 7 of the 8 of the most public polls, including our internal polls, show this race within a point, margin of error victory. We're going to continue to do what we need to do to make sure that we're getting the message out to the American people. And so, no, the polls don't shake us. They haven't been since the beginning. There are going to be polls that show us up, down, and all over the place, left and right. But our focus remains steadfast on delivering for the American people and communicating to American voters where they are about the stakes of this election, which I will reiterate again. Joe Biden wakes up every single day thinking about the American people, and Donald Trump is literally on a quest to destroy our democracy because he only cares about himself, revenge, and retribution, and has no interest in doing the job of being president of the United States.
Quinton Folks, thank you very much for joining us on this very important campaign day, and please come back as often as you can to update us on the status of the race.
Will do. Thank you so much, Lawrence.
Thank you.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.